Hello and welcome to today's webinar on executive job hunting, part of the SpenglerFox Transition programme. My name is Alice and I'm the Chief Care Officer of SpenglerFox and joined today by Sandra, the founder of Career Angels. Sandra has been a close friend of SpenglerFox now for over 8 years, and we are delighted to have formed this partnership with Career Angels intended to support our community of executives during their time in transition. So without further ado, I will now pass you over to Sandra.
Alice, thank you very much. As Alice already mentioned, my name is Sandra Bichl. As you might notice by my last name, I'm originally from Austria. It's a very Austrian last name. In the last 15 years, I've lived and worked in 8 countries. I'm familiar with the job market in Latin America, in the States, and across Europe, I'd say. The reason for today's call, the goal of today's webinar is the following. I'd like to share how it really is, how executive job hunting really looks like. We will be doing some myth busting, some reality check. We will look at how job hunting looks like in the 21st century. And with that, I mean the last 5 to 7 years versus job hunting 10 or 15 years ago. We will compare indirectly job hunting as junior, how that again changes once you're an executive. And I would also like to share tools for a successful job hunt. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is it was a rather generic natural story and natural progress. I started in recruitment myself in 2002 in Budapest in Hungary with a company that then used to be called TMP Worldwide and now is Hudson. And my specialization back then was recruiting lawyers, partners in law firms for Central and Eastern Europe. And when a person is a headhunter, it very, very often happens, as probably happens with you and your recruitment friends, that you ask them for help and advice. Help me with your CV, help me find a job, please write this cover letter for me. And I really enjoyed that part. And that's how Career Angels started 4.5 years ago. Our first client, we had our first client in June 2010. So instead of helping companies find candidates and managers, we are what I usually call the third side of the recruitment process. We represent or we support candidates. So we don't work on behalf of firms, we work on behalf of job hunters. The majority of our clients, and by majority I mean approximately this year 80% of our clients are members of the management boards, locally or internationally, or report to one. And what I'll be sharing today is based on statistics and real cases looking at the last 5 years, and based on the experience of my team. All of us, we are right now 7 experienced, well, we call it career angels, meaning executive career consultants. All of us have at least 7, 10, 15 years of executive search experience. So what I'm sharing is what we know from our experience and from the statistics and from the successes of our clients. And talking about our clients, I want to start with a client we're currently working with. Just look at my notes. The case I want to discuss today is about a gentleman that started, a South European gentleman that started his career in the early 80s. He then worked his way up to become a business development manager, director, sales director, general manager, then again business unit director, then again general manager. So he's been a business unit manager and a general manager in various countries across Europe. With the end of last year, his company was restructured, he sourced, coached, and handed over his responsibilities to his successor, and was then offered an outplacement program that he started January 2014. Over the last in the course of the first 8 months, he worked with an outplacement company that managed to support him only partly. That's how I put it politically correct. In the first 8 months of this year, he participated in 4 recruitment projects, which is not that much. And that is when he got in touch with Career Angels. And the first thing we always ask, and that is what we also always recommend to start with, is the first step. And here I'd like to ask you to also make notes, and if you have questions in the meantime, you will see on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar interface, you have questions. You can submit questions in the meantime, which will answer during the call or at the very end in the Q&A session. Okay. So the first question we always ask, what is your ideal job description? What is it you really want? And here the worst possible answer is, I can do anything. To give you also another concrete example, at the beginning of the second quarter of this year, we worked with a client that had over 20 years of experience, was responsible for sales and operations internationally in over 20 countries. And she could actually really work anywhere. Meaning she could work in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, in emerging markets. But by not clearly, why is it so important to know what you want? It's to help headhunters to put a label on you, to put you into a box. If you say, I can work anywhere and in any position, it's not really helpful. So here we have to be really clear in communicating what it is you're looking for in terms of job title, what kind of companies you're interested in, what kind of cities or jurisdictions. Saying anywhere isn't clear enough. A headhunter that works with somebody who has a candidate who can work anywhere, they don't know, well, shall I forward the CV to my colleagues in Europe, or does anywhere mean really anywhere internationally? So that has to be really, really clear. And here I'd like to invite you to make notes. So what is your ideal job description? What should be your next strategic step? Which position will bring you closer to your goal? What parameters are crucial? When we look at parameters, the same way a company has requirements for candidates, here we reverse the situation. You have requirements for the company, meaning what kind of capital should the company be originally from? German, Austrian, UK, US, American? How big should the company be? What turnover? Is brand important to you? If it is, then it should be a market leader. What else? What kind of situation the company is in? Is it a mature company? Is it a company that is developing? Is it a company that is developing only in certain countries or in general? Is it a company that's especially interesting for finance directors that specialize in difficult situations? Is it a company that needs a financial turnaround? all these things should go into your ideal job description. The second step is to look at yourself, to analyze yourself and work on your SWOT and especially on the strength of your strengths and weaknesses. So what are your strengths from an employer's perspective? And although we usually work with experienced managers, when we ask them, so what are your strengths? We hear answers like, oh, I'm very organized, I understand corporate policies and politics, and I'm a good people manager. Now the thing is, most people will say that, most managers will say that. So when we look at your strengths, really think about what makes you unique on the job market. There are a lot of managers that are good people manager, or at least that's what they say about themselves. What are your key areas of expertise? Why should your ideal employer hire you and not somebody else? So those are all questions that you should have answers to, because if you don't have the answer to that, nobody will. And should you decide to do that exercise, I'd recommend you add concrete examples. To give you an example, if you say your strengths are international expansion, colon, number one, I expanded sales into 3 new markets, into Greece, Turkey, and Spain in 2010 to 2014, and those were the results. Second example, etc., etc. So the more concrete, the better. We will need those answers for the first step, which is your CV, and for a later step, which are interviews. The first step, once we know what we are looking for and what your strengths are in context, in line with what you're looking for, we work on the CV. Now, according to Career Angels, there are 3 areas that are most important when preparing a resume. One is content. It should be relevant and concrete. By relevant, we obviously mean relevant to the reader. So information like birth date, nationality, marital status, number of children are not relevant. Usually not really relevant, well, not usually, actually not relevant is your high school. So when you're not sure whether to leave something in your CV or not, ask yourself, will my potential boss be interested in that particular information on my CV? Which means that usually when we look at the CV, we start with contact details at the very top, best when they're in the header, and then we start with a profile summary. A profile summary is approximately a paragraph long and gives a summary of, as it says, it's the quintessence of who you are as a professional, as an executive. And we usually get that question, can you repeat information from the CV in the summary? Yes, definitely. You can imagine or compare that to a trailer when you go to the movies. A trailer uses bits of the actual movie. It should encourage the reader to want to read more and scroll down to the second part of the first page, the second page, and maybe the third page. The second area we pay attention to is format and structure. And here, the only acceptable thing is perfect. In terms of structure, we look at first profile summary, then professional experience. In professional experience, we need the job title and the company, how long you've been there, a description, ideally in bullet points, of your responsibilities, then followed by selected achievements, and usually we include 3 to 5 selected achievements, and then the next job, etc. Followed by career and trainings, and at the very end, other or additional information. When it comes to formatting, we've heard that we are a bit too strict in that respect. So we believe that, especially on an executive level, the documents you prepare should really be flawless, meaning margins, double spaces, unified bullet points, unified dashes, proper document name, unified colors, uniform ending of sentences, typos or grammatical mistakes, uniform date styles, position and size of objects, uniform beginning of sentences, length of dashes, punctuation, uniform currencies. So it really should be absolutely perfect and flawless. Usually when we prepare documents ourselves and we've spent a lot of time with them, we don't see that anymore that much. That's why it's a must to show the CV to at least 1 or 2 people who are good at spotting mistakes, be it language mistakes or formatting mistakes. The third area, which is usually the most difficult area, is to add your personality and uniqueness to that document. How do you do that? Or maybe how do we want to achieve? What do we want to achieve? When a headhunter or an HR director or a decision maker open your CV, we want them to feel your personality. We want them to, for example, if we've decided that you are a very analytical person, we want them to say, oh, this person must be very analytical, or this person must have good energy, or this person must be really outgoing. How do we achieve that? By adding fonts, by choosing the right fonts, by adding a little bit of color. And depending on where you look for a job, you may or may not add your photo. Okay. Here's an example of a CV that I received 4 days ago. To give an example of a bad profile summary, it says, senior executive with international experience and proven business success, strong team player with high level of leadership skills, general manager experienced in new business development and companies restructuring, with main focus on design and implementation of change and new strategies, experienced and effective in multicultural environments, more than 20 years in B2B management in the following countries. The reason why this is not a good profile summary is because it's too general. And the way you can test that, if somebody on LinkedIn had that profile summary and you could copy-paste it, or they could copy-paste your summary, it means it's not unique enough. In that case, we'd have to rephrase it, senior executive with international experience, maybe add in parentheses what jurisdictions that experience covered. Proven business success, colon, and give examples. New business development, give examples. Company restructuring, give examples. What kind of strategies, etc., and what strategies in what area. Multicultural environment, what nationalities, what cultures. In the following, there were countries, but then again, everybody can exchange that. So now I'd like to invite you to look at your CVs. I'll give you a minute, a couple of seconds to pull them up in case you don't have them now. Once you have your CVs, only look at the first 50% of the first page. Why? Usually, depending on who has what kind of, whether it's Linux, Windows, or Apple, maybe they have what kind of text editor they have, they will see usually between 25 and 33%. Now ask yourself, what is the first thing you see? And again, to be a bit more objective, you know what you've written in the profile summary or what you see on the first page. So if you are not objective enough, ask somebody else, look, if you received a CV from a manager like myself, what is it you see? What's the first impression? Do they see your birthday? Do they see that, I don't know, your high school diploma? Ask them about what they'd say is unique about you. And if that is in line with what you decided at the beginning to be important, then your CV is good, even irrespectively of all the formatting mistakes. If the reader does not see your key areas of strengths, your key areas of expertise, it means that the CV needs work. Okay. That's the first part. This is now the second part of the exercise. Again, you can do it yourself or ask somebody for help to find all mistakes in terms of grammar, spelling, formatting, and all different kinds of inconsistencies. One word when it comes to grammar, it is best to write in the third person or to use a neutral form. We have asked, 2.5 years ago, we wrote an ebook called Job Hunting Director, and we asked, and we continue asking decision makers, HR directors, executive search consultants, what's easier for you to read? Full sentences, first person, third person, neutral, and approximately 95% answered neutral or third person. Especially when you write in a language that is not English, it becomes even more so relevant. You have to remember that people on the screen don't read, they scan. So you can also use visual aids, for example, color or bolding text, to make sure that the most important parts are highlighted. And for that, knowing that probably most of you would like to receive feedback on their current CVs, our offer with SpenglerFox is for you to receive CV reports as you are part of the transition program. But first, you already know that your CV is probably not perfect, so my suggestion is to first fix it. If you see mistakes, correct them. You may then send your CV to my email address, which you see on the screen, sandra.bichl@careerangels.eu, and please add on to the subject CV report /SFTP, and you should receive your CV report within 3 to 5 business days. Once we have the application documents, which is CVs. The CV is actually only part of the application documents. We have application documents consist of obviously the CV. We also usually prepare a document called project portfolio or business case portfolio. Once you have worked 15, 20, 25 years, it's very difficult to fit the most important things onto 2 or 3 pages, sometimes even 4. What we do in that case is the following. We prepare a resume that has the most important information in anti-chronological order, so starting with the most recent. And anything more interesting, for example, an M&A project, a restructuring, international expansion, anything that is worth mentioning and your potential employer should know, goes into that additional document. We usually say 1 or 2 projects per A4 page and never more than 5 or 6 projects. Part of the application documents is also what we call a cover email. So we don't write motivation letters anymore. We prepare cover emails. That's 1 to maximum 2 paragraphs saying why you're contacting that person, who you are, and what you're looking for. So it's much, much shorter than the traditional motivation letters. Now, once you have those documents, the 4th step would be to generate job offers. And here we have 4 channels, and we call that a support channel, which is LinkedIn. Personal contacts, speculative introduction, headhunters, and job portals. Based on our experience, and on the next slide I will show you statistics from last year, from 2013. We reviewed the sources of accepted job offers of our clients. 14% were generated by personal contacts, 79% by speculative introduction, 7% by headhunters, 0% by job portals. Which doesn't mean that job portals were not effective at all. LinkedIn did generate interviews, but none of our clients accepted an offer that was generated by LinkedIn. So, I would like to mention comments on each of the channels. Personal contacts, maybe main mistakes of our clients. One of the biggest mistakes we see with our clients that are job hunting is an inelegant way of approaching people they know. Meaning they reach out to contacts from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and instead of warming up the contacts, meaning instead of first touching base, asking questions, they shoot right away and say, oh, I'm looking for a job, can you help me? I'm sure none of you does that. In case you have friends who do, please tell them not to do that. It's a very, very common mistake. Personal contacts and warming up those lost contacts, it's very time intensive. What we usually help our clients to do is to divide their contacts into certain categories, into certain groups. And the parameters we take into consideration are the following. Are you on a first name basis with them? Which in English is not that tricky, but it is in other languages. So first, are you on a first name basis? How much do you trust them? And if you trust somebody really a lot, on a scale from 1 to 10, it's 8, 9, 10, even if you haven't been in touch with them for 3 years, you can tell them straight away, I'm looking for a job, please help. But if the trust level is 7 or lower, you have to warm up the contact. We look at parameters like when dividing them into groups. Are they maybe from a former company that you work with? What's the source of the contact? And once you've worked through the personal contacts and the professional contacts, you usually come up with 5 to 10 different groups of people, which means you will have to need 5 to 10 different approaches to those people to be actually really effective and to be perceived as somebody elegant and experienced and not as somebody desperately looking for a job. The second and most effective channel is speculative introduction. What does that mean? That means that you make a list of companies, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, that you would like to work for. Within those companies, you select or you find your potential and your potential superior. Meaning, in the case of our client that I mentioned at the very beginning, he would report to President of Europe. His ideal job would be to work in, we actually define 10 countries within Europe he would like to move to, and he can realistically move to. So which means that he, irrespectively of the country and irrespectively of the role, whether it was headquarters or being responsible for an area or general manager of a company, one way or another, he would have to apply to the general manager of Europe. Which means that we need to find that person, you will need to find that person, and you will need to find their direct contact details, meaning their email address. And with an elegantly written cover email, you then may send your application, which includes your CV and your project portfolio. Usually the questions we receive, and I had that today in the morning as well, but I can contact them over LinkedIn. Yes, you can, but it's not as effective as contacting them by email for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, not everybody is as active on LinkedIn as you might be. Number 2, when sending a message on LinkedIn, you cannot attach your attractive, unique application documents. So wherever you can, apply directly by email. Getting in touch over LinkedIn is, once they have reacted, you may send them an invitation on LinkedIn, or if it's a company that is really important to you and the decision maker hasn't reacted, then you may try the LinkedIn channel. But it's much, much better to go first for the email contact. Another objection I hear, and I heard it also today in the morning, but wouldn't it be better if somebody introduced me, like to have an endorsement? Wouldn't it be better if a headhunter introduced me, or a friend, or somebody I know on LinkedIn? We know from experience that it's much better to apply directly, again, for the following reasons. Reason number 1, decision makers appreciate proactivity. They appreciate that your ego is not in your way. We also know that if an executive search consultant recommends you, it might come with a fee. What is better? To have somebody apply directly without any fees, or to apply and then pay between 25 and 33% of your gross annual remuneration. So there's a financial aspect to it. Another thing we hear, but how do I know that they are actually currently recruiting on an executive level? Well, we don't know. That's why it's called the hidden job market. Looking at our projects this year, I would say that probably 2 out of 10 projects our clients are get involved in, only 2 were ongoing projects. 8 out of 10 job offers or recruitment projects were initiated thanks to the initiative of our clients, meaning that that a role was created thanks to the application. Because the President Europe, when they look at your documents, or a general manager, when they look at your documents, especially the project portfolio, they don't really see only a CV, they see what kind of problems you can fix for them. They look for an added value. This year, thanks to a speculative introduction, a general manager in Poland was replaced. There was no ongoing project recruitment process. The GM for Central and Eastern Europe said, well, I was thinking about replacing that person, but then that has to go through HR and headquarters, and then need a budget. But you presented yourself, so why wait? What else can I mention about speculative introduction? It usually surprises at a headhunters we work with or our clients how many decision makers actually react to your unsolicited email. It is usually around 50%, which means that, those are statistics from May this year. One of our clients applied or contacted 60 top managers in Europe, out of which 64% reacted to her email. We call it response rate. Obviously, not everybody said, oh, fantastic, we want to hire you, but the person received feedback. Looking at the response rate, usually 50% of those who reply is negative, saying, oh, thank you very much, we are currently hiring. The remaining 50% is between positive and neutral, meaning I'll forward your CV to HR, let's have a chat. And out of every 20 companies, you should, assuming that you do everything the way it should be done, you should have one serious job offer. So the more job offers you want to have, the more people you have to contact. And when I say that, I usually hear, but those companies or those people might think that I'm desperate. Another thing is, decision makers, when it comes to job hunting, they don't usually, and in the last 4.5 years, it has never happened, that they share information about available candidates on the market. When you apply, when you send your what's called unsolicited email, it says top management - confidential. They know that when a CEO or general manager or managing director or CFO is looking for a job, it is something to be treated confidentially. The third channel is headhunters. Last year, 7% of accepted job offers were generated by headhunters. And again, those are not market statistics, those are statistics of our clients. When it comes to headhunters, one of the most important things is headhunters don't work for you. One of the very, very, very few exceptions on the market where headhunters are helpful are SpenglerFox. And we can say that, or we as career angels know that because we know exactly what kind of headhunters reply in what way in which country. Top 20, 30, 40 companies in each market, we know how they react. And to be very honest and transparent SpenglerFox is there on top in terms of helpfulness and proactivity, and that's why they also have the transition program for candidates they cannot use in their projects, in their recruitment processes. So with headhunters, and that's, we need to be very clear that headhunters do not work for you. I hear very often, oh, but you know, I have two headhunters and I know two headhunters and one of them is looking for a job for me. No, they don't. They're not getting paid by you. They're getting paid by a company, and either they have a process or they don't. Sometimes we're asked, well, Sandra, can't you introduce me to your headhunter friends? Well, yes, I can, but it won't help because either they have a process or they don't. Either you fit or you don't. And the thing with headhunters, and that's why they're usually less effective than speculative introduction, is the majority of headhunters look at you. You know, when kids have those forms, circle and oh, I forgot the word. When they have to fit different colors and sizes of blocks into holes, headhunters are very usually rather simple. Say, okay, these are the requirements, fits or doesn't fit. A decision maker is a bit more creative. They usually say, okay, can they solve my problem or not? They're not as demanding or as strict as headhunters would be. So again, if you look internationally, and by internationally you'd have, again, to define which countries you are actually interested in. You should have contacts, and you should contact between 20 and 30 headhunters per country that you're interested in. So going back to the initial case I mentioned, with that particular client, we defined 10 countries, 10 countries, German-speaking countries were free, so in total 12 countries in Europe where he could relocate to, which means 12 countries times 20 to 30 headhunters. What effects did we have from that? In the last 2 weeks, he's had over 15 interviews with headhunters from different parts of Europe. And what's interesting is that even if, for example, let's assume you want to work in Hungary, it doesn't mean that only Hungarian headhunters have Hungarian projects. In his case, a South European headhunter had and ran a recruitment project in Eastern Europe. And although he had contacted that particular company in Eastern Europe, they didn't think about forwarding the CV to where the project owner was. So it doesn't mean that if you send your CV to one person, to one company in one country, that they will be proactive enough to then share the CV with their colleagues. It doesn't mean that your CV will be automatically in a database. You have to remember that usually very junior people, sometimes even students, enter CVs into the database. So assuming that they are not experienced enough to be able to really read your CV, they might add a wrong tag or a wrong category. So even if you are in theory in a database, you might not even show up in search results because a student clicked on 2 or 3 wrong buttons or checked the wrong box. So the key with generating job offers is to access the hidden job market. The visible job market is what you see in job portals. The hidden job market is where the magic happens. Career Angels has a group on LinkedIn for Europe. with a slight emphasis on Central and Eastern Europe, but expanding. So we go through job ads that we receive from headhunters, that we receive directly from companies. Companies start, both executive search firms and potential employees start realizing that we are a good source of candidates. So they started sharing their needs with us, and they know they don't have to pay for it, so we don't have any conflict of interest here. So we're not a real intermediary, we simply forward. So that's about generating job offers. Personal contact, speculative introduction, headhunters. Let me see if I have any questions in the meantime. No questions so far. Okay. Right now we have 15 minutes for a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat or the question session in your panel. Okay. Oh, now I see the questions. Good. Could we receive a copy of this presentation? Yes, Alice will send it to you. What about contacting HR directors? We contact HR directors in companies, yes, Thomas. We contact HR directors only as a plan B. Why? Unless you work obviously in HR. If you're an HR manager, the HR director is your superior, and then you obviously apply to them. HR is in most companies not commercial enough or not strategic enough. A lot happens first in the head of the head of the management board. So by the time something gets to the HR director, it might be already too late, or HR might not even be aware of the next strategic moves. So first, it's best to go really directly to your potential direct report. And if that direct report does not react, then you contact the HR director as a plan B. And a nice trick you can use to make sure the HR director replies is to say in the email, "Dear Mrs. Smith, in reference to my correspondence with the CEO," and then the name, "I'd like to da 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 da." You did have a correspondence. It was one-sided, but still, it will make the HR director at least look at your documents, and if there's something ongoing, you will know. Okay. What are the differences between US and Europe? Here I'd say, I'd even go as far as saying there is a difference between UK, US and Europe. One big difference is discrimination laws, meaning you can add more personal information, as for example a photo, in the CV, whereas in the UK and in the US you shouldn't do that, or even you must not do that. You can only say if you can work or cannot work in terms of you can include your visa status. In terms of other differences, to be honest, we haven't observed any yet. There are sometimes differences between countries, but overall, right now, when we look at applications, especially applications internationally or applications to international corporations, it is less and less country by country. It's more an international trend, meaning there are international best practices that are independent of the country or culture. Summarizing. Okay, next question. How do you find the right recruitment agency? Okay, more important than finding the right recruitment agency is finding the right executive search consultant. You can use Google, you can use Book of Lists, you can use LinkedIn, and you can try, I'm sure Google, if you say best executive search firms or ranking of top executive search firms, most top 15 to top 20 executive search firms are in most countries, and then within the firm you go onto their websites. Most of the executive search firms do have a list of consultants, and you choose the consultants that specializes in your either position or your industry or both. I hope that answers your question. And again, it's important to email the consultant directly, not via LinkedIn, but find their direct email address. Not do it via LinkedIn, and don't send it to the general email address as, I don't know, office@hudson.com or something. Okay, next question. How important is having a sit-down meeting with the potential hiring manager versus a good telephone conversation? And do you recommend email before phone call? Okay, many questions. I'll rephrase those questions. What is the best approach to contacting a potential hiring manager? First email, never cold call. And is it better to sit down or have a good telephone conversation? It doesn't really matter. Every company and every person has their own process, which means if the usual process would be to first have a screening call, which usually lasts 5 to 15 minutes. And if you are convincing in the screening call, they will call you back and have a Skype call with webcam or a telephone conference or a sit-down meeting. And nowadays, it doesn't really matter anymore if it's in person or over the phone. Just make sure you know how to handle a screening call and how to answer those questions over the phone properly. It's a very different dynamic, and if after 10 screening calls you haven't been invited to at least 4 or 5 actual interviews, it means you're doing something wrong. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so far I don't see any questions. Let me also update you on the client I mentioned at the beginning. I only mentioned results with headhunters so far, results with approaching his, we call them top 20 companies, in his case it was top 60 companies. In the last 2 weeks, that particular client had 10 interviews with potential employers. Now, the interesting thing is, having worked with an outplacement company for 8 months, he had 4 recruitment processes. And now working with us, in the last 2.5 weeks, he's already been shortlisted in 2 recruitment processes and had over 25 interviews. Which, I'm not saying that to tell you to work with us, I'm saying that I'm sharing that information to show you that this method works, it's effective. And it's simple but not easy. It's really not more than those 4 steps. And as we don't have more questions, I'll summarize that. Step number 1, know exactly what you're looking for and where. Step number 2, know your strengths. Step number 3, make sure to have flawless application documents. Step number 4, generate job offers. Meaning, and here again, although headhunters are only 7%, and statistically speaking 79% when we look at speculative introduction, it does not mean that it will work the same way for you. Looking at the client I mentioned at the beginning, right now he's had 15 calls with headhunters, 10 with top 20. Early second quarter, we also had the international project I mentioned, where the lady was involved in 12 recruitment processes within 6 weeks. Only 2 of them initiated by headhunters, 10 via speculative introduction. So don't assume that one is better than the other. You have to cover your basics. You have to use all 3 channels, your own contacts, top 60 or top 20, and headhunters. And as I promised and offered via SpenglerFox, all of you may receive a CV report, which is obviously complimentary. And for those who have an actual need and want to discuss their job hunting methods and their application documents and their next steps, you can also schedule a complimentary career consultation, which is over Skype and lasts usually 45 minutes up to 60. And we then can discuss what you've been doing right and wrong and what you can improve. From my side, I'd say that is all. Alice, is there anything you'd like to add?
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandra, for your time. I'm sure everyone would agree there's a lot of valuable information that you've provided there, and for everyone that's listening, I really do hope that you can take away some of the advice that Sandra has provided, follow up on some of those exercises that she shared with you, and to really kind of encompass what she said here and take full advantage of the advice. So Sandra, thank you very much, and I'll be in touch with everyone to share your presentation and the recording of the video as well. So much appreciated. Thank you, Sandra.